UFC 271, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2, the rematch. Welcome to the main card prediction video by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks, as usual, giving you the fight-by-fight breakdown, fight-by-fight analysis from that betting perspective. We want to let you know which fights are worth it, which fights are not worth it, which underdogs have the best shot at winning, and some parlay action towards the end of the video as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. Most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. If you haven't watched our prelim video yet, please be sure to take a look at that. We covered the first 10 fights of this 15-fight pay-per-view event card. Of course, we're going to take a look at the last 5 fights that make up the main card at that point. So I'm going to get started right away with fight number 1. We have Bobby Green taking on Nasrat Haqparast. Bobby Green is the favorite at -140. Haqparast is the underdog at +120. Haqparast lost to Dan Hooker back in September. He was, severely outclassed in that fight. Maybe brought him down to earth. Muay Thai fighter, shows a bit more of a boxing style in the octagon. He's a pretty sharp southpaw, good counterpuncher. Likes to stalk and control pace, cuts the ring off pretty well. That fight versus Dan Hooker, like I said, very unimpressive. He was fighting from the outside. The hands weren't active at all. I didn't really recognize him as a fighter in that one. And maybe it's just, class at that point. Look for him to engage with his opponents often, hit and be hit. He covers up pretty decently, though. Good IQ combinations, good fakes, good feints, solid jab. And still someone that I do consider to be, pretty solid as an MMA fighter and potentially still a prospect in this UFC. Taking on Bobby Green, he looked very good in his win versus Ala Quinta back in December. Pretty dynamic in the stand-up, fights longer than he actually is, fights from range. He'll still march forward when he needs to, keeps the hands down, so he relies on his speed and his reflexes in terms of his striking defense, and it's been effective for him. Likes the front kick to kind of keep it at distance, likes to move around the ring as well, look for those counterpunch opportunities. Has some wrestling too, although I wouldn't necessarily say to rely on it, but it is a fact that he lands almost 1.5 takedowns per fight at 40% accuracy. Like I said, Haqparast showed me a lot of holes in his game in his last fight. Could just be a levels thing since it was Dan Hooker, but Haqparast was somebody that you really thought could be there. And now you have question marks about that. I do expect this one to stay on the feet. I do expect a much better performance from Haqparast compared to his last fight. Still very tough fight to call, though. Haqparast looked chinny versus Drew Dober. If I look back at his fight back in 2020, can't necessarily call that a concern outside of that fight, though. But on the other hand, Bobby Green KO'd Ala Quinta in his last fight. Can't necessarily rely on that, though, because, again, Ala Quinta was coming back after a very long layoff. You could really make the case for both sides in this fight. I think it's a 50-50 fight. Haqparast could have that comeback performance, use some of the tools that we're used to seeing from him, or Bobby Green could be too dynamic and the movement can be too much for Haqparast, very much in the same way Dan Hooker's movement was too much. But I am going to roll the dice on Haqparast. I think, coming in as an underdog, and honestly, I think he would be the favorite if that Dan Hooker fight didn't happen. So, I do have to respect that. I do have to assume it was just a levels thing with Dan Hooker. I do have to assume he's not going to have 2 uninspiring performances back to back. I think he's going to have that comeback performance. I think he's going to reestablish himself as a prospect to look out for. And I'm liking that he's an underdog. That's sort of bonus points for me. So my official pick is going to be Nasrat Haqparast.
Yeah, this one's tough, man. This is going to be an exciting fight. This might be one of the most exciting fights on the card. These guys are going to both stand and bang. I'm not going to lie, though. Nasrat, I wasn't impressed in his fight with Hooker. The way Hooker was able to look like GSP in that fight with the takedowns. And I think Bobby Green can wrestle, too. I think Bobby Green's a better wrestler than Dan Hooker. I think Bobby Green has underrated wrestling that he could utilize that in this fight if he's in trouble. But the likely scenario is Bobby Green outboxes Nasrat Haqparast. If it's going to be a fight about who has better hands, I like Bobby Green in this spot. He's been improving a lot with his boxing, and I think this is a fight that he can land the better eye-catching shots and win a decision here, win a 3-round decision. But I like Bobby Green here, to the better boxer, stays on the feet, and if it goes to the ground, I think he's a better wrestler. So I think Bobby Green could be better everywhere. So I'm going to go Bobby Green here to get this done.
Second fight, we have Kyler Phillips taking on Marcelo Rojo. Kyler Phillips, majority decision loss to Julian Paiva back in July. A very dynamic striker. We know he has that good movement. We know he's light and bouncy on the feet at this point. Good timing with the striking as well. Very explosive, good kicks, good takedowns. Over 3 takedowns per fight, 55% accuracy. Look for positional improvements up top. Look for good submissions or decent submissions, I should say. Good ground and pound as well. Still a solid prospect. I mean, despite that loss, still just 26 years old. I want to see him channel some of that dynamic energy and become a more efficient fighter. I really do think that's going to, take him to the next level, because it was a lot of wasted effort in that Julian Paiva fight. He looked good, sure, but it cost him his cardio, and it effectively cost him the decision. So I want him to channel it a little bit better. And I think that loss was a way for him to kind of come back down to reality in terms of who he thinks he is in there. Marcelo Rojo, on the other hand, it's been almost a year since his last fight. He lost to Charles Jourdain back in March of 2021. Good striker, good in and out movement, a lot of feints. Show me striking diversity, show me explosiveness. Most of his wins are via KO, and he has 16 wins to that point. Good power, a lot of pop in his punches. I've seen him use some switch stance. I've seen him load up on his punches a bit. So that could be something Kyler Phillips takes advantage of. I've seen both of these guys tire out in terms of cardio. So I can't say it's a glaring weakness for either fighter, or I should say I can't say it's a glaring strength for either fighter to take advantage of the cardio concerns that I've seen. Prediction-wise, I think Phillips' dynamic movement should be the difference here. We saw it even with Charles Jourdain versus Marcelo Rojo. Jourdain was just a more dynamic mover, and it was giving Rojo some problems. Rojo kind of stays in your face. The lateral movement is not really there. And we saw Jourdain use that, although it was close leading up to the TKO. We saw Jourdain use that dynamic movement to his advantage. And I think Kyler Phillips has more of that than Charles Jourdain. I don't know if Phillips gets the finish, but I do think that he's going to win at least 2 rounds very decidedly, very clearly. Steep odds, but from a pick perspective, I have to go with Kyler Phillips, and I don't really see how you'd go the other way outside of maybe a knockout.
Yeah, I actually think Marcelo Rojo has a couple of avenues. So obviously he can get the knockout. He's the more experienced guy in there. And my biggest concern with Phillips is that cardio. And in his last fight, he slowed down tremendously after that first round, and ultimately cost him the fight, his cardio. So in this fight, he's clearly the better fighter, the better striker, the better grappler, better wrestler. So he's arguably better everywhere. And he could be making some noise in the future in the UFC. I could see him being around for a while. I think he has a higher ceiling than Marcelo Rojo. I think Rojo kind of hit his peak here. And I think Phillips is going to get this win here, but the odds are too spread apart here, because Rojo can definitely win this fight if Phillips gasses out. He's going to still be there. But I like Phillips here. His full arsenal, his striking, his grappling. I can even see him getting a submission in this spot. But I'm going to go with Kyler Phillips here to get back in the win column here and beat Marcelo Rojo.
Third fight, Jared Cannonier, Derrick Brunson, a good middleweight fight here. Cannonier had that unanimous decision win over Kelvin Gastelum back in August. Switch stance fighter, good striking, good hands. They're pretty sharp. He's a patient fighter, good kicks, good intentional use of the calf kick specifically. Pretty efficient striker, like I said. He won't really swing wildly. He won't really waste shots. He pairs that with good head movement. He pairs that with some solid striking defense. We know the power is there. Of his 14 wins, 8 of them are via KO, TKO. He fights from the center, and he's physically strong. That could definitely be a factor in this fight going up against Derrick Brunson, who, of course, we know is a wrestling specialist. 5-fight winning streak for Derrick Brunson. He beat Darren Till back in September. Serviceable stand-up. I would say he's a lot more patient than he was at one point. Probably not the best striking defense. And again, I think that could potentially cost him here. And I think that has to do with why he's an underdog in this one. We know he's going to go for that takedown. We know he's going to go for that wrestling, really good takedown entries. Probably one of the most effective wrestlers in the UFC. Again, I mean, the numbers don't look extremely stellar. 3 takedowns a fight, only 35% accuracy. But like I said, I don't put too much stock into accuracy because it tells me that they're going for it. And then sometimes an effective clinch against the cage is worth almost just as many points as a takedown. So I don't put too much stock when I see accuracy in the 30s. When he does get you on the ground, he's going to smother you. He's going to lay and pray. He's going to present some solid ground and pound. He's going to score points. He's going to keep it on the ground. You almost want to consider the round over once Derrick Brunson gets on top of you. I mean, as a result, I look at Cannonier's takedown defense. I think that's going to be pivotal in this fight. It's just 62% on paper. But like I said, he's a physical specimen, physically strong. I wonder what's going to happen from those exchanges. Both of these guys are up there in age. I think Cannonier's 35. I think Brunson's 37, something like that. But I feel like Brunson has maybe a bit more on the line here. He hasn't really gotten that shot since losing to Adesanya back in 2018. And he's only been winning since. I think this could be a fight that finally gets him that title shot. I think he's going to, strategically play this fight as safe as possible with his game plan. And I think if Cannonier wins, it's going to have to be via knockout. Whereas if it goes to decision, I like my chances with Derrick Brunson landing takedowns in 2 of the 3 rounds and winning a close decision. So, I mean, this is a tough one. I think Cannonier almost should win, but because of some X factors, Brunson having a bit more on the line, Brunson being a relentless wrestler, and the running joke that, blonde hair Brunson is unstoppable at this point. I'm going to go with the underdog. I'm going with Derrick Brunson, 6 wins in a row, potentially getting a title shot after this.
Yeah, this is a tough fight. I just watched the interview today. Brunson stated whether he wins or loses his next 2 fights, he's going to retire. So I'm not sure where his head's at. I'm not sure what that really means. But definitely he's indicating that for his family and whatnot, he's looking at retirement in 2 fights. So I'm sure he wants to go out with a bang here. They're matching him up with a tough fighter in Cannonier. Who has a good low center of gravity here to stop some of these takedowns. He's strong. He can kind of muscle his way out of some positions. But again, this is blonde Brunson here, and I think he's going to get this to the mat. This is a hard fight to pick here because I'm not sure. We know Brunson has world-class wrestling. Can he get Cannonier down? If you can get him to the mat, after that first round and he has you on the ground, he kind of saps out your energy. Kind of dictates how the fight's going to go for the rest of the fight. So it's very important Derrick Brunson gets that takedown. But I also think Derrick Brunson has underrated stand-up. He can easily land one of those wild lefts and hurt Cannonier, get this to the mat, and take it back to his wheelhouse where he's good, where he's successful. So this is a tough fight, but I'm going to go Derrick Brunson as well. I'm going to go with the underdog here. I've been rolling with Brunson for a lot of these underdog spots they had him in. Almost all those fights, if you go back in the videos, I've been taking Brunson in all those spots. But again, to me, this is the toughest one. This is the toughest spot for me because Cannonier is physically strong. He can negate some of the grappling just because of his strength. And all he needs is a couple leg calf kicks, and Brunson's is going to be affected. But I'm going to go Brunson, the more well-rounded MMA game, wrestling, get him to the mat, ground and pound. So I'm going to go Derrick Brunson to get the win.
Moving on to the co-main event of the evening, we have Derrick Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa. Derrick Lewis, he got back into the win column. He beat Chris Daukaus back in December, so not too long since his last fight, getting right back in the ring. We know he's a big striker. We know he's a patient striker. We know he has that touch of death power, especially as a counter puncher. If you overcommit, he will catch you. Like we saw in the Chris Daukaus fight in some ways. He controls center of the octagon. He's going to look for that big right hand, Deontay Wilder style, right? Almost in a predictable fashion. Tai Tuivasa, 4-fight win streak. He beat Augusto Sakai back in December as well. So 2 heavyweights that are getting right back in the ring. He is considered a street fighter. That kind of tells you all you need to know about him. The Aussie fighters are definitely tough, and decent stand up. Otherwise, he usually controls center of the octagon himself. So I'm curious to see what the movement dynamic is going to be between these two heavyweights. Good jab, good overhand right, good usage of calf kicks, pretty patient, decent pace. Won't really gas himself out too easily. I don't see either of these guys gassing out just with the pace that they go at, and with the fact that I don't think this fight is going to decision. I think someone's getting knocked out. I think they both have the ability to do it with one fight-changing punch. And in some ways, you're flipping the coin of who lands it first. But if I look at this fight, Tuivasa, yes, he is the more agile of the two fighters, and he probably offers more on the feet, at least in terms of striking diversity. Like I said, especially with those calf kicks. But I think Lewis's power is just a little bit different than Tuivasa's. I think it's a bit more scary. I think it's a bit more touch of death, a bit more one fight changing punch compared to Tuivasa. Tuivasa is more likely to kind of hurt you on that second or third punch as part of a combination. Whereas Lewis, one punch that lands clean virtually hurts everyone. Like I said, Lewis's power is a bit more scary here. And I think that's ultimately going to be the difference in this fight. So, look for Derrick Lewis to kind of keep winning and make it hard for UFC matchmakers to determine whether or not he should get a title shot or not. So I'm going Derrick Lewis minus 190. I'm not too mad at that. It is still a heavyweight beware. Keep in mind, both guys can catch each other. So I don't know if I'm jumping all over it from a betting perspective, but I see this fight going in Derrick Lewis's favor maybe 7 times out of 10, if not more. Probably 7 times out of 10. I don't want to overstate it, but yeah, either way, I'm going Derrick Lewis. He's going to be my pick.
Yeah, this is a really tough one. When I look at Tai Tuivasa, I think he could win this fight. This is 50-50. I think Tai Tuivasa has the better cardio. If this gets out of the first round, his odds have to go up. Gets out of the second round, his odds have to go up. Derrick Lewis doesn't have the best cardio. We see him really gassed in fights, even though he gets the finish in the later rounds. He probably threw like 3 punches that whole round because he was so tired. So his cardio is a big thing. I think Derrick Lewis needs to get him out there in the first 2 rounds. Maybe a knock on the later rounds, but he could be coming from behind at that point. So this to me is a tough fight. I'm going off gut here because again, to me, this is whoever lands first is going to win. I seen Greg Hardy kind of wobble Tuivasa. I can just imagine what Derrick Lewis would have done if that was his punch. So I'm going to go Derrick Lewis. Not the best logic in why I picked it. I just think it's a 50-50 fight. I just got to go with the guy that has been in this spot here, has fought the better guys, and obviously the heavier puncher. If this is going to come down to someone getting knocked out, I feel more better going with the heavier hands. So Derrick Lewis is my pick.
Let's take it to the main event at that point. Then middleweight title fight, Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker, the rematch, and 4 rematches. I mean, I like to watch the original fight and sort of ask myself, first of all, is time relevant? Did they fight 15 years ago or just a year or 2 ago? How has each fighter changed since then? Izzy, we know he's coming off of a win versus Marvin Vettori in June. We know he's a masterful striker. We know his takedown defense has proven to be good in the middleweight division specifically. 80% takedown defense overall throughout 11 UFC fights, and that includes the Jan Blachowicz fights at light heavyweight, of course, where he was severely outweighed. Jan took him down a few times, and still 80% takedown defense on paper. So got to respect that in terms of his ability to stop the takedown in this middleweight division. Whittaker, coming off of a Kelvin Gastelum win in April, he's 3-0 since the first fight. We know that he's pretty light on the feet. We know that he has good speed, good movement, good timing, good long jab, good in and out movement, sneaky 1-2 with the back leg high kick. It's almost a signature combination for him in some ways. But, again, it's tough. This fight is tough in some ways because you want to go Izzy, no questions asked, but you are looking at 2 of the better strikers in the division, probably the 2 best strikers in the division. I can't really say much has changed since their first fight, despite Whittaker being 3-0. Whittaker was the aggressor. in that first fight. Adesanya was playing counterpuncher role. Adesanya used that counterpunching to drop Robert Whittaker in the first round. Just getting out of the way with his head movement. Does Whittaker catch him this time instead of the head movement being effective? Or does Adesanya play that counterpunching role again and clip him again? Whittaker didn't really use that perceived ground game advantage that he has. I mean, he's not a huge takedown artist in the UFC, less than one takedown per fight. But nonetheless, you got to perceptually see him having the ground game advantage, and he didn't use that. He didn't resort to that. Didn't even really attempt it. And again, that could go back to Adesanya's ability to stop the takedown very effectively, especially at middleweight. I think what potentially changes in this fight, as Whittaker asks himself what to do, maybe he attempts it. Maybe he attempts to use those takedowns, especially after what Jan Blachowicz was able to do, albeit a different weight division. That may have been a blueprint for Whittaker to say, hey, why don't I try that? But outside of that, I don't really see this fight going much different than the first. In some ways, I think about Poirier McGregor, comparing what their last fight looked like compared to what their third fight looked like. I didn't really see much change happen. So I kind of want to go in the same direction as a result. I like Adesanya here. I kind of like -280. Obviously, you want it to be closer when you're picking the favorite, but I don't see really why I would switch my pick to Robert Whittaker after watching the first fight and after watching what both fighters have done since then. So I'm going Adesanya. I think he's going to retain his title. I think he is simply Whittaker's kryptonite. And I think, that he's one of those people where as long as Izzy is around, Whittaker won't really truly have that shine, a la Daniel Cormier and John Jones. I think it's kind of that same situation. Izzy would have to be out of the picture for Whittaker to truly get that respect as top of the division. So I'm going Israel Adesanya on this one. I think he's going to beat Robert Whittaker. I think he's going to retain his title. I'm probably going to include him in my parlays. Izzy is my pick.
Yeah, I agree with a lot you said there. Like I haven't seen much change in Whittaker's game to tell me that he's gonna get Adesanya this time. Like I haven't seen no change. I haven't seen nothing in his game that tells me that. And when I look at Adesanya, he's only getting better. It's gonna be harder to grapple with this guy. The only guy that was able to pretty much take him down and have success was Jan Blachowicz. But that's because Jan was such a bigger guy. Against these middleweights, the size, like he's so much stronger against these middleweights that it's gonna be, even if they get him down, he gets right back up, like the Marvin Vettori fight. So he's definitely improving in all aspects of MMA. It's gonna be hard for Robert to to get in there. He obviously has that knockout chance. I think that's his only way to win this fight, is to knock Israel Adesanya out. He's been knocked out in kickboxing, so that is possible. But aside from a knockout, I see Adesanya utilizing his movement, the range, leg kicks, jabs, feints. I see him just putting on a striking display here like he did in the first fight. So I'm going to go Israel Adesanya to win this fight. But I think there's a good chance this can go to a decision here. But I'm just going to go Israel to win the fight.
Let's take it to Vegas at that point. And again, let's start with underdogs. I will go first here. We have 5 fights to choose from. Underdogs being Haqparast, Marcelo Rojo, Derrick Brunson, Tuivasa, as well as Robert Whittaker. I have 2 underdogs in mind. My stronger underdog being Derrick Brunson. A second underdog I am considering, more so due to a gut pick than anything else, because I know you're on the other side of the fence here. I'm going Nasrat Haqparast. I think 2 underdogs I would look at. Obviously, I would not parlay them together, so I would consider them separately. Plus 140 for Brunson, plus 120 for Haqparast.
Yeah, I like. I'm gonna go with my guy Derrick Brunson here.
Derrick Brunson plus 140, as mentioned, probably the most solid underdog to choose, maybe on the entire card. I would argue that. In terms of favorite picks, again, 5 fights to choose from. I actually do have a couple of them in mind, and there is some gambling involved here. Kyler Phillips, just too steep, but I really think he wins this fight. A gut pick, but in a knockout type of event, I got to go with the more dangerous hands, as you mentioned. Derrick Lewis would be a second pick I would look at. And unsurprisingly, I'm looking at Israel Adesanya. Those three fights would pay out a 2.61. $100 will return 261. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return 653.
Okay. Okay, so I like I'm gonna go Bobby Green. I'm gonna go Israel Adesanya. And I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, pretty solid. 2.27 there. $100 will return 227. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return 568. So let's officially sign off there. A pretty good event on the books. UFC 271, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2. You know what to do by now at this point. Subscribe to the channel, press the thumbs up on this video. Most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. Who is your pick for the main event? Who are some of your underdog picks? What parlays are you looking at? Most importantly, how do you feel about our picks? Let us know. We'll be happy to respond and have some good banter back and forth in the comments section. But officially signing off, this has been UFC 271, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2, the main card prediction video by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. And in our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's get it.